Welcome back to the M101 Podcast. Remember, this is just a small extract of the full podcast. On today's episode, myself and Rob detail how beliefs shape our bodies and in turn our lives. Hope you enjoy it.
This is the Movement 101 Podcast.
Could you give us a bit of insight as well of how you work on your mindset? Because that's something that we both actively do. Like, we take time out of our day, out of our week, to make sure that we are working on things, that we value, etc., that we're working on our mindset, on our self-limiting beliefs. For example, you've been on Damien's Patreon account for the last year or so at this stage, and Damien's doing an awful lot of work for us in the background. We have huge projects coming up. But give us an insight, for example, that you use in your training that you've learned from Damien.
One thing, it's just almost the fact that I'm, and this goes for a few subscriptions, I suppose. I'm paying money. I'm seeing this content. I'm involved then. Like, Damien is obviously, okay, he's rowed across the Atlantic. He's preparing to climb Everest. All right. So one thing I wanted to improve was just to push a little bit harder in my strength sessions, not to skip reps, not to like, I've done enough. Just to push myself a little bit harder. So just the fact that I would watch Damien's training, he did one there recently on his preparation for Everest, or what he's doing. I go down to, say, he uses some mindset cues, so I go down to my training, I kind of develop my own. It's like, okay, I'm going to complete every set that's prescribed, every, rep. Okay, maybe some of them are on failure, but I'm going to complete the whole session. That's one thing. There's going to be times in it that you'll want to quit. Know that your mind is going to tell you to quit before your body needs to. And I'm not doing anything crazy, but I'll give an example as walking lunges. I've just stripped in my back garden where I walk up and down, or I have that sled as where I push it up and push it down. So I've upped weight, and I was like, you will tell yourself to stop halfway down. You just be ready for that kind of self-dialogue. So you're almost prepared. And even one thing, like I got into I got into swimming last year, but I was doing a bit of the cold water immersion. And what one thing Damien says is reframe it. Rather than going in and say, oh, this is awful, I'm not looking forward to this. Go say, you're going to feel amazing afterwards. You're going to go in, a few minutes, cold water, it'll be tough, you'll get your breathing under control. Mind over matter, you're going to feel amazing afterwards. And just that accomplishment, then, you can bring that into your day and into the rest of your week, etc. But
that's brilliant, because them 2 or 3 things that you do there, you can see they're uncomfortable. It requires effort. Yeah. It requires consistency to do it. Yeah. And then, like you said, once you begin to see the progress from that, you can begin to stack on top of it, and it can grow from there.
Yeah. And another thing that helps me with training, is the fact that, I remind myself, I want to be doing my sport into my 60s and 70s and even 80s if I get there,
Your why are you doing this? And that's going to push you through and them tougher times. Yeah. Because if we then take aging into this fixed mindset, and it's just something, for example, that we have is our Hands to Floor series. So you have this fixed mindset that you are older, you can't improve how you physically move. My hamstrings are always tight. No matter what I do, it makes no odds. Our Hands to Floor series is literally, it's a 4-week program that you could easily do for longer if you wanted to. But you can get some really quick wins in the space of a week, 2, 3, or 4. You can see your clear progress. You can physically move better and get the result from simple looking exercises that are actually quite tougher. But there's, again, look for something that you can do to affirm a new belief that, oh, look, I can change. And 4 weeks is nothing. Like, it's a month. Like, it's not a long time. Imagine doing that for a whole year. 12 months of the year. 100%. And like me and you, imagine doing it for 10 years. Now all of a sudden you can see, whoa, I've been holding myself back in terms of what I believe my body is capable of. And it's not aging, it's the issue. It's my belief around me aging. It's the belief that I can't adapt, I can't change, or I'm unique in some way.
Yeah, I like that. I'm unique in some way. Like, look under a microscope, go online and Google a muscle cell under a microscope. Do you think your muscle cells are any different? You're human. Your blood's red. You have ligaments and tendons. It's who makes up the rules. And I heard someone put it some way. It's evolution makes up the rules. You will grow muscle. It's a kind of survival mechanism. If you're putting it under stress, if you're getting the nutrition and the rest, the muscle will respond to that stress and it will hypertrophy. The opposite is true. Listen, if I decide, I'm going to give up this training lark. I'm not going to lift another weight for the next year. My muscle will atrophy. You know, like put your arm in a sling. Put your arm in a sling there for a few weeks. You will lose muscle in that arm. It will start to ache. I've been there with injuries. So it's just them are the rules. You know, you're no different. So it's amazing the way I believe can kind of limit people from, you know, really taking ownership and enhancing their lives.
So it's the biggest thing to take away from that is having a growth mindset around aging. No matter what age you are, you have the ability to develop through hard work, through good strategies, input from others, for example, a community of like-minded people.
Yeah, and there was a guy who climbed Mount Everest. You could Google it there. I forget it. I can't say his name. It's Japanese name. He's Japanese. He climbed Everest in his 70s. And when I was reading, that was his first time.
No way.
And he went up again. You know, and there's a couple of guys who are like, you know, trying to be the oldest person up Everest. So I get an email. Yeah, I've just turned 30 and XYZ. You know, so I was like, wow, you're just turned 30. Literally, people in their 30s. People are still at the top of their sport in their 30s.
Yeah.
You know, there's a guy who ran in the Olympics. Oh, I forget his name. Collins, is it Kim Collins? Who ran sub 10 at the age of 40. You know, so challenge that about your age. Where what you think matters more, your diet, your physical training, your recovery, your sleep, your lifestyle, or the candles on the cake, as I think we mentioned the last time. You know, obviously you can massively influence your physical state by training. You know? Yeah,
and again, just to finish off on this topic, because it's just like life does take over for a lot of us in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. Kids, work, you know, sleep, like I said, is mentioned. Your lifestyle is affected.
You can allow it to take over. I mean, there's 168 hours in a week. How much time do you need? Like, I would suggest, you know, just roughly, I do about 4 strength sessions a week. You know, I could do 5 or 6. You know, 4 suits me well. Maybe in future I'll push it a bit harder, you know, or, you know, take some time off or whatever. But 4 hours a week, strength session, for example. And then, like, I'm going to say 8 minutes a day, daily mobility routine most days. And on top of that, you know, get your steps in and you run the odd swim.
Yep.
You're not talking about a huge amount of time. You know, you just aren't.
Yeah.
You go to bed at a certain time, you can get up early, you can make that time. And the benefits of that, when you reach 60 versus not doing it, or when you reach whatever, it just means, hey, 60, I'm going off snowboarding. Of course I am. You know?
You're not being held back by your body. You're not being held back by your age. You're not being held back by the self-limiting belief that you have to slow down because you are getting older.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, well then moving on to the next one. So we kind of talked about aging, but let's look at a growth mindset or a fixed mindset around movement, Rob, because this is a huge issue we see in the industry. It's a huge issue we see with people and their beliefs and the education of what they're being told. But bad movement. This is massive. For example, don't bring your knees over your toes. Don't round your spine. Don't do that. You're going to die, etc., etc., etc.
This is how you lift a box.
Yeah, which so again, we kind of just give some kind of context around this of a growth mindset. We just kind of talked about it, and we have done over the good few of the episodes. We know the adaptable nature of the human body. So, for example, rounding your spine, it may not be accessible to somebody loading that position, but we know we can progressively load that and do that. But if you're told by a health professional, Jesus, don't round over, you're going to break your back, or you're going to put a disc out, etc., or whatever you've been told, you now have a self-limiting belief around what you can do. So you don't do it, or potentially you guard up. You're fearful of that movement. When you go into that range of motion and you actually do it, because of the education you've been given and been told, you actually guard yourself. Your muscles tense up and try and protect you bending over. But just give us some information, because I don't think people are aware. Exercise has just been invented by humans.
That's right, modern human invention, which was a necessity because all of a sudden we're one of the few mammals on the planet that don't need our physicality to survive. You know, so we've talked about this before. You can survive. You know, lockdown's a good example. You can survive. Hopefully, you can do your work online from your kitchen on your laptop. Right, a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, you know, you needed to work physically. You know, most people, you needed to work physically. Even into construction, for example. My old man was a builder, but like, you know, hey, there's still a lot of heavy lifting, but a lot of it's taken off. He used to, when the blocks used to come in, you know, the blocks for the bricks, etc., they'd lift them onto the subfloor, right, with a crane, and then I go around stacking them. But in the old days, there was no crane to lift them off. They'd have to take them off one by one. Now they're lifting them off in a bale of 64 or whatever, so you could place them around. So, it is kind of digging excavations, for example. JCB does it. That used to be like pick and shovel, So.
But because the idea now and what we see across social media is like, don't do X, do Y in terms of movement. And that's why Movement 101, that was the name. It was all-encompassing movement.
Yeah.
We're constantly told, is this Pilates or is it yoga? What kind of mobility or stretching is this? It's just movement. We don't have to pigeonhole any kind of movement into good, bad, or indifferent. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah, that the instructions around not doing X, Y, and Z, they're based on the fact that a modern human is weak and can't move properly. Which is an assumption that is, it's a fair assumption in some situations, but it's a bad kind of reflection of how we move in this physical modern world. Also, that the human is weak. You wouldn't tell a chimpanzee, well, he probably wouldn't understand you. Or maybe you would if you could do sign language. Don't pick up that log like so. But
animals are the perfect kind of example though, because it's like they just move for the sake of moving. Like they're not told you shouldn't do this or this is bad. The human body was designed to physically move, and us restricting or saying this is good and this is bad is literally stopping people move.
Yeah,
and that's a huge issue.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Because like you say, something there's no bad exercise, and obviously there's exercises that you shouldn't do if you're not ready for them.
Exactly.
Like I was watching a rugby there a few weeks ago, and there's this prop forward or front row player getting ready to go out onto the pitch. Huge, big, probably 18 stone guy. Massively powerful. But he was on his feet, like if you can picture this, he's almost in a downward dog position, except he doesn't have his hands on the ground. He had his head on the ground, and his hands were off the ground. So he's warming up his neck by putting half his weight in his head, the other half on his feet. But his neck is like, his neck is like your quad, So that's appropriate from him because he's built it up. What you were saying, the human body is adaptable. I'm not going to get my mum to do that exercise. You know what I mean? So yeah, no bad exercise, inappropriate exercise depending on where you are. But if I was to do that, maybe on Instagram, people say that's dangerous, you shouldn't be doing that. I probably shouldn't be. I haven't built up the strength of my neck, and I definitely don't think people should kind of follow that if they've never done anything. But you can get to that level if you want.
Yeah. But and that's the idea. Like there is no such thing as a bad movement. There's just an unprepared body.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, people feel fragile. They feel like again they can't adapt. Or we'll go back to that open of aging again. As they're getting older, they're getting weaker. They're getting tighter, stiffer. They're getting more immobile. When the body is just adapting to the stimulus you're providing.
Someone said it to you actually at the knees over toes. I forgot about that. I think you're doing sissy squats. And someone commented, "Oh no, you can't do that. You can't." And this was a health professional, a trainer, a personal trainer. Right. I remember seeing it. This was a while ago, but it's like I didn't wade in. But like, again, soccer player. Okay, lads, we're going to beat these guys today. We're playing 4-4-2. Whatever you do, don't let your knees go over your toes. A rugby player. If someone tackles you from behind, don't let that knee travel over your toe. You can see how ridiculous it is. They're moving. Like, just look at the sports pages. Sports pages are always interesting because, they're photographs of people playing a game, whatever it is. They're always in these mad positions that are never repeated. They're over this way. They're contorting their bodies. So inevitably you're going to pop your knee over your toe, whether maybe if you're walking upstairs or whatever. So to say that you shouldn't be doing this in the controlled environment of a gym, it doesn't make sense. There's a right way of doing things, of course.
Well, even just going to the right way of doing things, because one of the first things that we would look at, and we've mentioned it previously, is improving how someone moves. Is we look at their training volume, making sure their body is recovering well in order to adapt to be able to do what they want to do. Yeah. So before we look at going, let's do a movement to improve how you physically move. Well, are you doing a bit too much now where your body can't adapt to the stimulus or handle that load, for example? So will we go a little bit lighter? So we'll just use the knees over toes analogy. Maybe we just start with body weight. Maybe we start with a progression that you're able to currently do now that challenge you a little bit.
Support yourself if you wanted.
Exactly.
Less than body weight.
You wouldn't go straight to doing a movement that myself or you could do, and we didn't start there. But our body recovered, it adapted, and again, we're nothing special. It's just a human species.
Just like you wouldn't go on, first day, hopefully try to squat 100 kilograms or.
Well, you couldn't physically do it, and you would injure yourself. Yeah. But of course, we wouldn't go in and do that because one, we would know you would do it, and two, we would literally injure ourselves. But that's not to say that all of a sudden squatting is bad. You just couldn't do that movement right there and then because of all the other factors that people aren't considering. So going back to, I suppose, that growth mindset of no bad movements, and if you look at your own body, so you know now you can't do certain movements. Well, what do you want your body to do? Off you go. Follow a program, make it adapt, get stronger, whatever it is. That means playing sport in terms of what you do, it's surfing, etc.
Yeah, past injuries can have an example. You know, you can have this range fear.
Yes.
You know, for example, I've dislocated both my shoulders multiple times playing rugby years ago, a long time ago. So I got surgeries like 18, 19, but that's if you're on most people aren't going to be able to see this, but external rotation of the shoulder was a position where a lot of people dislocate their shoulder, and that's when if you know the I surrender position, so you put your hands up in the air, bring your hands down, that's the I surrender position. You use it in Pilates, and that bring your hands back is external rotation. And for someone who's dislocated their shoulder, initially they don't like going in that position. The surgeon even joked with me when he was testing the stability when he was putting it back. Oh yeah, people hate when I'm about to dislocate their shoulder. It's like, what? You know, because everyone's just fearful of that movement because that's where you got injured and that has association with your brain. So what people can do is avoid that range of motion. I'm not going back there. In case my shoulder pops out again, which initially makes sense if there's, you know, torn ligaments, etc. But if you avoid a position, what's going to happen? You're going to get weaker and weaker there, and then inevitably, if you're playing your sport, you're going to end up there again. Then you're not prepared, and then the injury can reoccur. So you almost have to go back loading that as soon as you can, appropriately. You know, so your injury can have a bad impact. Yeah,
and then I just want to use the example as well of the spinal segmentation or moving your spine. We deal with an awful lot of people with back pain. So as much as the movement, spinal segmentation, which you may have seen in any of our programs if you're currently a member, gives you the strength and the control to move your spine. But actually it gives you the confidence. You realize this spine is designed to move. You realize it's meant to flex and extend and laterally flex and bend. Like there's no such thing again as a bad movement. And that repetition is mapping that information to the brain. And now you can go and replicate that on 2 feet. Stand over, bend over, reach for something, etc.
Exactly. Keep your back straight.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not straight. Look at a picture of a spine. Look at all those ligaments. I did a post a while ago. I had the amount of ligaments, discs, muscle, etc. associated with spine, all designed to move. You know, so if you're not moving it, right? If you're purposely not moving it, inevitably when you find yourself, and this can happen, someone can bend down to pick up something, that's the first time they found themselves in that particular range of motion, that's when they can have a little twinge or whatever. You know, so that's a big one. I think that the spinal movement, you kind of have to, just keeping everything neutral was the be all and end all a few years ago, you know. And
the idea is, though, like there is neutral. There's a range that you are in, but there's options either side of that. And the idea being, if you're lacking a movement, we'll say on one side, you're going to rely on the opposite side more and more and more and more and more. And your potential for going there all the time is that compensatory pattern and overuse injury on that side. We want you to have movement options. So you may be in neutral, but you can move any which way you want to, again, through repetition, through that exercise. But going back to that idea of growth mindset in terms of bad movements. So one is to realize that, again, you are not anyone special if you can't currently bend over or do a certain movement. You can adapt, you can get better. You have that growth mindset of, I can follow a program. My body can literally do whatever I want it to do if I follow an appropriate program. I think me and you are proof of that. Like genuinely, people are amazed at what I can do physically. And I'm a little embarrassed. Yeah. Because it's like, well, it's like it's just trained this way. Like, you know, I'm not genetically gifted. I was tight and stiff and immobile, 10 years ago. And it is the accumulation over time that it does become impressive. Like some of the stuff you do in the rings, etc. It does, but like you're just layering on top of layer on top of layer. It's like building a house brick by brick. It will be built, and I think what it is people like to see the ring flow. But like you layer rings program, for example, you're starting off with an assisted pull-up. Exactly. An assisted dip, You're building that foundation of strength on the rings first, and all of a sudden the ring flow becomes much more accessible. Yeah, like rings is interesting. I remember talking to a guy who was a member of
mobile for life, or he came to one of our seminars. This was a good few years ago, and you know, he could deadlift a friggin' house. You know, he was strong, and he was asking me what I did for upper body. I said, well, at the moment I'm doing a fair bit of rings, and he kind of said, cheapers, I couldn't do that. I was like, heckin' right, you could.
Yeah,
of course you could. You'd be better than me in a few months if you wanted. You're 25 and you're bloody strong. And that's what he was associating. He can do a pull-up, he can do a dip. You know, it taking a bit of time. It is a new skill. It's a different kind of training.
Yeah.
But 100%, he could have been an animal on the rings if he just, you know, allowed himself.
Well, again, like you said, it's a skill. Movement is a skill. Most things are a skill, and having that growth mindset, you know that you can develop that skill.
Just on the belief stuff and that, something I heard of someone a while ago is like, you know, be aware of what you tell yourself you can't do, and what will happen is you'll say, oh no, I couldn't do that, and you'll say it straight away, and that's almost instructing your brain not to contemplate it. So this pre-contemplation, contemplation, etc. Might be giving up coffee as an example used before. I could never give up coffee. Or, you know, maybe I could. You know, of course you could give up coffee. You know what I mean? Allow yourself to entertain the idea, and that's where the new belief can kind of grow, I suppose. And
just to add to that as well, I think that's the importance of solitude, because a mentor of ours said something to me there at the end of last year, and I kind of reacted without even thinking about what he said. You know, I was like, oh, what the hell? Why are you saying that to me? And then because of the work that I do in terms of my own kind of spiritual work, I was able to actually sit with it and go, oh no, hold on here a second. Don't just react. Don't just say, oh no, you're wrong for saying that to me. And I was able to sit with it and go,
you respond.
Yeah, and I was like, I think about it, go, actually, no, he's right here, you know, because that belief is so ingrained, like you said, through that past experience or whatever the hell you've done in the past, or like I said, who you're surrounded by. But, you know, question that, and then knowing more about yourself and what you believe and what you understand and what you feel, it's much easier to have that. But the last thing I just want to mention on the growth mindset of bad movements, the hashtag we always use, explore how you move. You know, there's no such thing as a bad movement, and your belief that there is more self-limiting than, you know, you could ever actually truly believe. Thanks for listening. The full episode of this podcast is available to all Movement 101 members. If you would like to join our online community or want more details, please drop me a DM on Instagram at Brian_Movement101. See you soon.